views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
Hi, and welcome to Open BxRx Tuesday on BronxNet, a weekly program providing you the latest information, resources, services, and community efforts taking place locally here in the Bronx and virtually. I'm your host, Kibin Alleyne. Coming up, just as New York City begins to reopen and COVID precautions begin to lift, reports of a COVID-19 variant is quickly making its way around the country. An epidemiologist for Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health joins me to discuss the variant. Does this variant have the ability to bring us to previous COVID restrictions? Then, a new study finds families across the country are barely making ends meet, with many making less than $31K a year. Author of the study from Oxfam America joined me for a discussion on livable wages for families across America. How could New York benefit from paying all New Yorkers $15 an hour? After that, one man is on a mission to spread hope across the country with his latest work, The Hopeful Project. Charlie Hewitt joined me to discuss why he wanted to bring hope to the Bronx. Will this project bring more hope to our city? And finally, after weeks, months, and even years of built-up tension between Russia and Ukraine, February 24th marked the day Ukraine saw an attack from the Russian military. Join us as we take a look back at how the people of the Bronx showed their support. So stay tuned, Open BxRx Tuesday starts now. Welcome to Open BxRx Tuesday on BronxNet. I'm your host, Kibin Alleyne, and I'd like to invite you to get social with us at BronxNet TV on Instagram and Twitter, and BronxNet Community Television on Facebook. As COVID precautions around the city have begun to lift, reports of a COVID-19 variant is quickly making its way around the country. The World Health Organization classifies the variant as a sub-lineage of the highly transmissible Omicron variant. Joining us to speak about the rise of the variant is epidemiologist at the Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health, Dr. David Dowdy. Dr. Dowdy, thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks so much for having me.
So there are reports about the Omicron variant coming back to our country. Can you tell us more about this and how it's made its way back to the forefront?
Well, so this is a new variant, or was a new variant back in November, and a much more highly transmissible variant. And it caused a big wave back in December, January. So this happened throughout the world, and we weren't spared here in the U.S. either.
Now, what makes this interesting is that this variant is considered to be extra contagious version of the Omicron variant. Why are we seeing so many different types of variants in regards to COVID?
Well, so we know that all viruses mutate and create new variants, and those viruses have a reason to want to be more transmissible because it helps them survive in the population. So we are going to continue to see new variants as we go along with this pandemic.
So there's possibly another variant called Deltacron, which I think sounds very interesting. Are we seeing a variant have a variant?
Well, I think what we see are variants and then subvariants beyond that and subvariants beyond that. So we might be seeing something like this, but I think it's a little bit too early to say that this is going to be the next big thing.
Now, this is not the best time to see a rise in variants since pandemic restrictions around the country are being lifted. Do you know if this variant has the ability to possibly bring us back to adhering to previous COVID restrictions?
Well, right now with the current BA2 sublineage, which is now more than 50% of all cases in the U.S., we're seeing just a very slight rise, if any. So I don't think that we're going to see a return to restrictions on the basis of this current subvariant. That's the dominant strain right now. But there's nothing to say that we won't see another variant in the future that might bring us back to that place.
Now, I guess just speaking in a general sense, can you tell us how variants can be a threat to our current public health?
Well, any variant can cause a wave of disease that can make people sick, put them in the hospital, and ultimately, unfortunately, some people will die. And so, any new variant that really takes off as a new wave is going to be a public health threat.
Now, vaccines and testing have been a major part of why our country has been able to reopen. However, we're learning that testing has become less of a priority for many households. Can you first just tell me about the importance of testing and how that actually has helped us so much in this fight throughout COVID?
Well, if you don't know that you have COVID, then you don't know that you should be responding to it. And so that's why it's important for us to continue to test people, especially those who have symptoms. Um, I think that maintaining a testing infrastructure so that when we do have that next wave is really an important priority because we need to be able to know when waves are taking off, and individual people need to know if they have COVID so they know whether to isolate or quarantine, for example.
And can you also talk a little bit about home testing and just kind of how that's a little bit different from possibly going to the doctor and the results with that?
Well, home testing makes it a lot easier because you can do this from your home. In general, home tests don't have quite the same accuracy as what you might get from say a PCR test at the doctor's office. But if you get a positive test, you can generally trust that result. If you get a negative test, it might be a false negative, but positive tests, even on home tests, are generally reliable.
Now, according to your graph, 3 months ago, our country saw 250K cases a day, and now we're seeing 28K a day. It looks a lot lower compared to 3 months ago, but could we be seeing inaccurate numbers due to the lack of testing?
So it's possible that we're seeing inaccurate numbers, but I don't think that the level of accuracy is really changing over time. So I really do think that we're in a much better place now than we were 3 months ago. And hopefully those positive trends will continue into the future.
Now, this has been a concern for many, but I would like to set the record straight. Can you tell me about how this variant or any future variant can affect vaccinated people?
Well, so vaccines work. They work against even the most current variants, even though we've been through a number of them. So just because we have new variants does not mean that you shouldn't get vaccinated or that your vaccine isn't working. Vaccines do over time lose some of their protection against getting infected, but they provide strong protection from getting really sick, even many months out. So, if you haven't gotten vaccinated, there's never a better time than now. And I don't think that we should be thinking that these vaccines aren't working just because we have new variants.
So that kind of leads me into my next question. Are we protected with the current vaccines? You said yes on the market, but there's an addition of a potential fourth shot. Now, who is this fourth shot for? Who would be the best candidate for that? Can you just tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so this is changing over time, but certainly people who are older or have compromised immune systems are eligible for a fourth shot and should probably get those. Again, the vaccines provide good protection against getting really sick, but they don't provide long-term protection against getting infected. And so if you're someone who's really at risk, if you were to even get a relatively mild case, it's important to get that fourth shot as well.
So can you tell me a little bit about your experience as a health professional, just getting people to actually get vaccines and how that experience has been like for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think every person's story is unique. There are some people who really want the vaccine, some people who have very valid considerations, whether it's their own health concerns, concerns of the community, concerns that they haven't had the best relationship with doctors in the public health system in the past. I think we really need to try and meet every person where they are. And help them to weigh the risks and benefits. And I think for the vast majority of people, the benefits of getting vaccinated outweigh the risks. But we have to have those stories. People have to have a reason to trust that. It can't just be a one-size-fits-all solution.
So I'm really happy that you said that because I wanted to talk about how I noticed that it has taken many health professionals quite some time to get our communities, especially communities of color and communities in the Bronx, to a place where we can enjoy this and feel safe taking, the vaccine. If this becomes a larger issue, do you think it will be challenging to get people to go back to just how we were with pandemic precautions?
Well, hopefully we're never going to have to go back to the lockdowns that we saw early in the pandemic. I'm hopeful that anytime that we have future waves, because we are building up immunity in our population, I'm hopeful that anytime we have future waves, we'll be able to adopt less stringent measures. But we may have to do something in response. And I think that now when cases are lower is a great time to continue that effort of building trust to where people realize that the enemy here is the virus, it's not each other. And we all of us want to do what's best to keep ourselves healthy, our families healthy, the communities around us healthy. And we should be having these discussions even now because there probably will be another wave in the future. And the more we've done in the interim to build that trust and develop good systems of care, the better off we'll be.
Now, as of now, many people are returning to work. And as I mentioned, many bans are being lifted. What can people do to enjoy this freedom while still staying safe?
I think it's important to keep an eye on where things are going. Right now, as you mentioned, cases are relatively low. And I think that it's appropriate for people to enjoy this freedom. I think that we have to be prepared for the prospect of another wave coming in the future, but also to react appropriately when cases are on the downslope, so that otherwise we're never going to get to enjoy life, and that's what life is for. We should be enjoying it with each other, especially when cases are lower.
So since we're located in the Bronx, I kind of want to focus on the Bronx for just a second. I know, like I mentioned before, that there were a lot of people here that were a little bit apprehensive, and I still know there are people who decided not to get the vaccine. What's something that you would say at this point to kind of encourage those communities with their valid reasons for being afraid to kind of go out there and take a step for their health?
Well, I think it's important to talk to people around you, and especially to talk to people who have gotten the vaccine. There are lots of people around who've been able to take this vaccine and had good experiences with it. But to recognize that these are valid concerns, I think to find people that you trust and make decisions that are best for you and your families is really what we're all trying to do. And the more that you're able to find people who've taken that step and to talk about their experience with them, I think that will be a good thing.
And lastly, do you have any tips for just staying safe? Like if you're at your workplace, should you still wear masks? Things like that. Can you give us something before you go?
I think it's fine and appropriate for people to wear masks if you're wanting to stay a little bit safer in your workplace and elsewhere. There's nothing wrong with doing so. I think also just thinking about the overall level of contact that you're having with people. So maybe keeping parties to a smaller number, not going to those huge events of tens of thousands of people if they're going to be in tight indoor spaces, but also keeping an eye on where cases are going. If cases are going up, being a little more cautious. If they're going down, enjoying life a bit more.
All right, thank you so much. Can you just quickly tell us how people can stay informed about just COVID in general and our public health? Where can they go? Trusted sites that they can go to?
Yeah, well, so the CDC site is always a trusted site, as well as the New York Department of Health. There are COVID dashboards that you can go to and see. The more you're able to see where cases are going in your specific jurisdiction, so in the Bronx, the better it is, because what's happening in the Bronx is not necessarily what's happening in Utah, and it's important for you to be reacting to what's happening where you are.
All right, Doctor, thank you so much for joining me and educating everyone. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
We'll be right back with more Open BxRx Tuesday.
We know that people are dealing with the health crisis, but there's also a lot of food insecurity.
We're giving out healthy food options, and that's what's key here.
If you're a senior, you have a disability, they'll actually deliver meals to you.
The residents are anxious, they're worried, they're scared, they want to be tested.
When things were happening in our community and we couldn't get the help.
There's almost a presumption of criminality that attaches to your skin color.
The site will prioritize those who are at highest risk in the population.
If you feel symptoms and you'd like to visit one of these COVID-19 testing sites here in the Bronx, you may call the State Health Department's hotline.
Important to note about this site is no reservations are needed. This is a walk-in clinic.
A lot of us are out of work and looking for something to do.
We have the machinery and the skills to make large scale of these masks and gowns.
Take care of your people. It's going to go way further than we actually can understand.
Right now, employees like myself are just adjusting to the new reality.
Reporting from BronxNet, this is Trans. Welcome back. A study from Oxfam America finds families across the country are barely making ends meet, with many making less than $31K a year. Senior research advisor at Oxfam America, Kaitlyn Henderson, joins me for a discussion on livable wages for individuals and families across our country. Kaitlyn, thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
So before we jump into the study, can you tell me a little bit about your organization, Oxfam America?
Yeah, absolutely. Oxfam is a global anti-poverty organization looking to sort of think through and create new solutions for poverty wherever it exists. And my program, my team is really focused domestically on the US, so looking at poverty within this country.
So you led a study about low wages in our country. Can you tell me more about what actually just inspired it?
Yeah, absolutely. I think right now there are so many people really struggling to make ends meet, and we wanted to have a better idea of who are the people in this country that are having that hard time, that are working full time but still can't quite afford to pay rent and keep food on their table. We wanted to have a better idea of who those people were, where they live, and knowledge is power. And so understanding who these communities are that are most impacted, the goal is to empower those same communities to have that information and advocate for themselves.
Now, new research finds that 31.9% of workers in the U.S. earn under $15 an hour. Federally, minimum wage remains at $7.25, which is really shocking. And it's a rate that hasn't moved since it began in 2009. How is this impacting families in our country?
Well, what it means to say that almost 1/3 of workers in this country are making less than $15 an hour, that is equal to over 50 million people in the country. So these numbers are really staggering. We wanted to really hammer home that when we're talking about low wages, we're talking about millions of people. And just like you said, the federal minimum wage has been stuck at $7.25 for 13 years. And so working families cannot afford to keep a roof over their head and food on their tables, and it's totally unacceptable. So what we're looking at is real working poverty in this country that is impacting tens of millions of people unnecessarily.
Now, we're also experiencing inflation within our country at the moment. How does this further add to that financial stress?
Well, one thing to bear in mind is inflation is the highest it has been in over 4 decades. And when we're thinking about low-wage workers, the impact of inflation hits particularly hard. What we know is that inflation is really impacting the cost of housing, the cost of gas, and the cost of food more than anything else. So everything that is the most essential for people to get from to where they need to go and also to eat and to survive is completely being impacted. And because wages have not kept up with these really insane rates of inflation, people just can't afford things. We know that this federal minimum wage of $7.25 has lost 21% of its value since it was last changed in 2009. And this just really is not acceptable.
Now, contrary to popular belief among certain individuals, people actually do want to work, and they work very hard. Can you tell me how the pandemic has affected this, especially with those who are considered essential workers?
Yeah, absolutely. And I really want to reflect on what you just said. All work has dignity, and all work is really important and needs to be valued in this country. One of the things that happened in the last 2 years with the pandemic is a lot of the most important, valuable work that was often overlooked, the work of our janitors, the work of the people that pick and cook and deliver our food, the work of people in warehouses, was for once really celebrated and seen as absolutely essential. This work was celebrated also as with hero pay. These individuals were called heroes. But what we're seeing is that the true and literal heroes of the last 2 years are being paid a poverty wage. And this is not how we should be celebrating our heroes in this country.
Right. And I like that you mentioned that, because it's like, it sounds nice, but like, I can't pay bills being called a hero. So I'm really happy that you brought that up. Now, a really important part of this study is looking closer into the finding, especially regarding the demographics. Your study looked at race, gender, and the intersectionality of both of those identities, as well as age and whether people had children. Why did you want to break it down into so many different categories?
Well, it's really important to understand the identities of the individuals that are the most impacted by low wages. And what we know is identities are not singular. It was so important to kind of bear in mind all of the intersecting facts and features of a person's community and of their identity. So we wanted to focus on race because there has always historically in this country been a racial wage gap. And there is absolutely a gender wage gap, and that gap grows even wider when you think about women of color. And so it was really important to bear in mind all of those pieces. The reason we wanted to bring in age is because there is a common misconception that the majority of people that are low wage workers or minimum wage workers in this country are teenagers. That is absolutely not the case. In fact, 89% of adults are the ones who make less than $15 an hour. And then we wanted to think about family and family status because realistically, this is really impacting single parents. And we know due to the pandemic and the care crisis that we're facing in this country, one of the biggest issues is childcare. And so if single parents are the ones that are making these low wages, they absolutely cannot afford childcare. And so there are all of these really important policies that are layering on one another and making it harder for low wage working families to make ends meet. And that just should not be the case.
So I actually really appreciated seeing this breakdown, and I like to focus on the findings regarding gender. There's a very large disparity between women and men in the workforce, especially in regards to minimum wage. Can you kind of explain and walk us through that finding?
Yeah, absolutely. So what you're looking at here is a map of who in this country makes less than $15 an hour that are men, and it's color coded. So the lighter the color, the fewer the people are. Nationally speaking, about 25% of men make less than $15 an hour. But when we're thinking of women, which is this next map you see, 40% of women nationally are making less than $15 an hour. So just in general, those numbers are hugely different. But then when you're thinking not just about gender, men versus women, if you're also thinking about women of color and bringing that race component back in, those numbers get even worse. Whereas 40% of women in this country are making less than $15 an hour, a full 50% of women of color in this country are making less than $15 an hour, which is horrifying and totally unacceptable.
Now, we're actually going to put another graph on the screen, and if you take a look at that graph, only 25% of working men earn less than $15, while 40% of women workers earn less than $15. How are these low wages impacting women specifically?
Well, one of the things that we're really noticing, and again, that the pandemic made very clear, is a lot of the ways that we undervalue the work of women or work that is technically or traditionally considered women's work. And the jobs that really come to mind are childcare workers, domestic workers, teachers, nurses. There are a lot of jobs that are disproportionately held by women and are undervalued and underpaid. And so one of the reasons that we're seeing a disparity in men versus women and who makes low wages is the jobs that are being held, but also the reality that there is a gender gap, a gender wage gap in this country. Women do earn less than men. And when you bring race into that component as well, women of color earn even less than white women and certainly less than white men.
So we also see a very large disparity between white workers and Black and Latino workers, and you also have graphs for that as well. Can you explain what we're seeing on the maps?
Sure. So when we're thinking about nationally, there are 46% of Black workers in this country who make less than $15 an hour. 47% of Black workers in this country make less than $15 an hour, and 46% of Latino workers make less than $15 an hour. So these numbers are really shocking. It's almost half of those two communities are making less than $15 an hour. And if you look at the national map, the states, it varies pretty severely. So depending on where you live is really deciding whether or not you're able to afford things like housing and things like food.
Now, when posing the question, what can be done, Oxfam America says the solution is simple, the political will is weak. I really like that saying. Can you further explain?
Yeah, what that means is we already have solutions. In fact, there is a solution in front of Congress right now. It's called the Raise the Wage Act. We really want to celebrate the fact that the Raise the Wage Act is inspired by the Fight for 15. It was a movement started by workers in 2012. So there are policies and legislation in front of Congress today that's inspired by workers advocating for themselves. And the great thing about that piece of legislation is it does a lot of the things that we think are really important. It gets rid of minimum wage exclusions, of which there are many. It ends sub-minimum wages, which is certain jobs that you legally can be paid less than the minimum wage, depending on what the job is. And it gets rid of those exclusions, it gets rid of those exceptions, and raises everyone in the country to a $15 minimum wage by 2025. So there's no perfect solution. $15 an hour is still not quite enough for families, but it does some important work. The issue is not the policy. The issue is the fact that there is not the political will right now from Congress to push that and make it the law of the land. And that's what we're really missing.
I really like that you mentioned that even though for some places the goal is 15, is still very, very low for many people across the country. And I definitely believe that it's going to be a fight that's ongoing. So I really appreciate your organization kind of showcasing this study. And I love the graphs and just looking at those demographics. I thought that was really helpful. Can you please tell us where people can go to learn more about this specific study and more about the work that you do?
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you so much. The work is available right now on our website. The interactive map where you can click on where you live and see a little bit more information is at www.oxfamarerica.org/low-wage-map 2022. And there you can see all the demographic information. You can click through all of the data, all of the maps, click your state, find out more. You can even see where your state compares to national averages.
All right, Kaitlyn, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you so much.
We'll be right back. welcome back. Based in Portland, Maine, one man is on a mission to spread hope across the country. Artist Charlie Hewitt joins me for a discussion on his latest work, The Hopeful Project, and we're actually going to take a quick look at this clip telling us more about it.
I'm Charlie Hewitt, and I'm an artist. I'm a sculptor and painter. I created the Hopeful sign during challenging times to serve as an inspiration to myself and to others. I thought that United Way was the perfect connection for that word, that message, and their mission. And to be hopeful requires action. It requires being part of something bigger than ourselves. We need each other now more than ever to step up and to show up united.
Charlie, thank you so much for joining me. Now, before we talk more about the Hopeful Project, I'd love to learn a little bit more about you. Can you tell me about your background and how you actually became an artist?
Oh my God, I became an artist. I came to New York in 1969 to be an artist. And I went to a school called the New York Studio School for a year or so. And then I just got myself a studio, and that's been my life since then.
Now, I understand you have installed a variety of artworks in different locations across the U.S. under the Hopeful Project. Can you tell me more about this project?
Well, the Hopeful Project began with a simple request from a friend of mine who owned a building at Speedwell Projects in Portland, Maine. And they asked me to put something on the roof of their building. And it was a dark October evening, late in October, and I went out to look at it. I said, we need light. I just felt like we live in a dark state, and that'd be a great statement. And it's not a very busy intersection and corner. I have made static pieces. I have a piece on the High Line and a number of pieces that represent my images and shapes in abstract forms. But in this case, I didn't feel like doing that. I felt like taking the opportunity to speak. And I felt that I wanted to put a message out that would communicate to the thousands of cars that came by that particular intersection every day. And I came up with the idea of hopeful. I wanted something to be proactive and that said that we require action, we require commitment to be hopeful. It's not a passive word. And it came up, and then it sat on the building. It was popular but then it kind of took its own life. I started putting one in Lewiston and Maine and Bangor, Maine. I'm putting one in Augusta. I put 5 up in Eastern Maryland. And then it took different trajectories, and it started becoming a billboard, electronic billboard. It became a banner. It's morphing into a different kind of piece, and depending on the location.
Now, I really am interested in the fact that you said that you wanted something that was active, not passive. Can you expand on that? Because I actually never thought of, like, obviously the word hopeful sounds very positive, but I actually never thought of it as like something that you can like work towards or as something that's active. Can you expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, you can hope you win the lottery, but to be hopeful requires commitment. It reminds us that we are part of a community. To be hopeful means that we are part of something moving forward. Say at one end of hopeful is the gratitude. At the end of, say, you've succeeded in your life, grateful. Hopeful is in between that word and hope. And some people just live on the very edges, and hopeful is the one thing they do have. Other people benefit from a good life and can feel hopeful and come out with gratitude. But the hopeful itself, to me, is a signifier of commitment.
Now, can you tell us about the creative process behind bringing this artwork to life?
Yeah, well, it started with a doodle on a piece of typing paper. And then I created colors that I wanted to work with. I took it to a great friend of mine who's a designer up here in Portland, and the collaboration came up with what we have. I wanted arrows and striking kind of imagery to make it art and make it more than just the word. So, because I'm an artist and I can't help it, I want things to be full of imagination.
So,
yeah.
So I'm not an artist, but I really like seeing the process and seeing people like how they put it together. How long does it actually take to kind of get it off of paper and then onto, a building?
Well, there are 30-foot pieces. There are 30-foot hopefuls. They take 3-4 months to complete. They need metal bending that's made out of aluminum and lights and wiring. It's a complex process.
So the Hopeful Project has actually made its way to the Bronx. Can you tell me how the Bronx was selected for your project?
Yeah, and this talks about how long it takes to make a hopeful. The 30-foot piece takes 3 months because you have to weld and bend and crimp and just create the piece. What happened to me around late December when my wife and I were driving, and she had a friend who works for Outfront Media, which is large billboards, New York, Times Square billboards, for example. And I said, call Lisa and see if she can get me a hopeful. And we did. And Lisa's very creative and very, very full of life and energy. So we put up a billboard, electronic billboard. So rather than taking 3 months to fabricate and cut out of metal and weld together, we could hit a button with the artwork and it just illuminated a 20 by 60 foot electric billboard at the exit of the Lincoln Tunnel. So that was quite a phenomenon for me. Then I realized I didn't have to spend all my time grinding away, that there's other choices. Now that left me with this possibility that came up. Because of the billboard, the New York Times wrote about it, and a TV station interviewed me. And as a result of that kind of exposure, a woman named Lisa Watkins, a proud resident of the Bronx, hit me on Instagram, messaged me and asked me, we could use hope in the Bronx. We're having some difficult times and we could use it. So my heart went out to her. I called her and I said, let me see what I can do. And then what came to my mind, now this is the new creative process with new technology. So I didn't have time to build 3 or 4 months fundraise to put up a large piece of bolt to the side of a building. But what I could do, and I could put an electronic sign up. And what came to mind when I thought of the Bronx post-pandemic, post-COVID, was the people in the Bronx who got up every day and went to work in the service industry and the nursing industry and the firefighters, everybody, the first responders. They got up every morning and went to work and took those trains into the boroughs to do whatever they did because they needed the money, they needed the work, and they suffered the worst during the virus. So I thought the most appropriate place, the most signifying place to put these hopeful signs would be where people had to walk down those stairs in those treacherous times to get on a train to go do service for us people in this world. So I want to celebrate them. They didn't have cars. They didn't have a place in the country. They had to go to work. And I want now to put them in, so when they go down the trains, they see somebody saying thank you in light.
So I'm actually really happy that you kind of brought those to the Bronx. Where can people actually find these pieces from the Hopeful Project throughout the Bronx? 'Cause I understand they're in several places.
They're in 6 locations. I don't have all the answers to those spots. They keep moving around. Mm-hmm. They're kind of like, where's Waldo? Like, you see them, they're up. It's magic.
I kind of like that too. I like that idea because it's kind of spontaneous, so you feel kind of special, like, oh, I found one.
Yeah, I found one. Yeah, and the more we can put up, the more that'll happen. That's my intention now, is to find sponsors to proliferate this image, proliferate the site. I'd love to light up every subway entrance and celebrate every person who went on those trains and went down those stairs to those trains to go and do service for us people.
So I really love this, and I would also love to highlight some of the other work you've done for a moment, because you have work that's part of permanent collections in world-renowned museums like the Whitney, the Met, and I think these are really huge accomplishments. Can you tell me more about them?
Well, I've been working forever. I mean, what's that give me? 20, 50, 55 years at making art. And some of I've been in the wilderness and I've been in the spotlight. that comes and goes in an artist's life. I'm a studio artist. I paint, I make prints, and I sculpt. But this hopeful has given me a whole new range to work in. All of a sudden, I have a brand new field of experiences I can have with light. And actually, it's given me a position to be outside of my studio art profession, but to be a participant in the community in a positive way. And yeah, I've got a piece on the High Line that's been up for years. I make static sculpture, which I think is fine. Don't get me wrong, but something about this particular piece of art that doesn't need to be seen as art to be appreciated, to be felt emotionally, that belongs to everybody, is important to me.
Now, I have one last question for you. We have about a minute left. As an artist, do you feel that more artists should use their art to address larger situations facing different communities?
You know, you can end up with a lot of bad art if you do that too. I mean, it just depends on what you can do. Not every just making art is political. Just the fact that in our culture we have the option to be an artist says so much about who we are as a country, and that's grace. That's a gift. I don't expect every artist to be able to be a political artist. I didn't even think I had it in me till this came up, and so that's my feeling about the artist's responsibility to politics.
Now, how can viewers stay up to date with you and your work, and how can people bring the Hopeful Project to their community?
Oh my goodness, yeah, I have a website called Charlie Hewitt Studio. I have an Instagram site called _Hopeful Projects, and my Instagram account, the _ Hopeful Projects Instagram, and my Charlie Hewitt Studio on Instagram as well. I mean, in this new world, you can't hide, and anybody who wants to access me can do it that way. And they can see what other projects I've been doing.
All right, Charlie, thank you so much for joining me.
Oh, it's a pleasure. Thank you for letting me have a chance to talk about this. Appreciate it.
We'll be right back with more Open BxRx Tuesday. Welcome back. After weeks, months, and even years of built-up tension between Russia and Ukraine, February 24th marked the day Ukraine saw an attack from the Russian military. Following the events of the invasion, on Sunday, February 27th, Bronx residents held an auto rally in support of Ukraine, stretching from St. Michael's Church to the Russian diplomatic compound in the Bronx. Let's take a look back.
We had a prayer vigil this morning at St. Michael's Ukrainian Catholic Church. We all have relatives in Ukraine, in many different parts of the country, who are currently under fire from many different sides.
The people in Ukraine are innocent, and they didn't do anything to deserve this. I just feel bad for them.
The misinformation coming out of Russia is absolutely incredible. There's people saying things about there's neo-Nazis in Ukraine. The Ukrainian president's Jewish. 70% of people in the country voted for him. America has not had a Jewish president before. So the fact that there's such an important democracy and it's such a beautiful, wonderful place that is democracy, we're seeing people like Vladimir Putin trying to crush that.
We're doing an auto rally. It's a peaceful protest. We're going to the Russian mission in the Bronx and Riverdale. Please support us. We need everyone's support. This is not just a Ukrainian thing. This has become a global thing.
We're in Riverdale in the Bronx, which happens to be home to this Russian compound, probably one of the largest Russian compounds in the country.
Nobody here likes what Russia's doing.
We're at this location today because behind me is the Russian Residents. I remember being here with Rabbi Weiss and a lot of other people from our community protesting at the time the Soviet suppression of Soviet Jewry. That this street was co-named Sharansky Square in honor of the great Russian dissident. The symbolic importance of being here, part of what is the Russian government after all, I think sends a very loud message. The world is going through a very dark period where autocrats in many, many countries have taken over. What's happening in Ukraine, to me, is reminiscent of what happened in Europe in the late 30s when Hitler went into other countries and started one by one gobbling them up. Putin is going to have to be hurt for what he's doing. And if he's successful in Ukraine, and Ukraine's 40 million people, it's not a tiny country, what's going to stop him from going into Moldova, which is right next door, and then other countries, and perhaps even NATO countries such as Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia, Poland maybe? He's a tyrant, he's a dictator, and frankly, I'm beginning to think he's a madman.
Seeing another example of the community coming together to show resilience and support of the Ukrainian community. New York is home to America's largest Ukrainian community, and there's tons here in Riverdale and also in Yonkers. And then here we have literally a convoy, so many cars and so many people. It just came and it was, kind of tear-jerking. It was really amazing.
I'm very proud to be Ukrainian, and Putin has to leave our country. He has to take his hands off our country. My family, we're all family, and we are here for each other. Nobody should come in their country and just take country like that with tanks. This is very wrong.
Mama! I'm Ukrainian American. I came here when I was 4 years old, and it's very tragic what's happening in our home country. I would like to see the war stop immediately to protect our family and our homes.
Because it said, you know what? The same thing that happened over there, it could happen in any other country. He's a dictator. And these people doesn't deserve what he's done to them. Look how many people died. I wouldn't want someone to go to my country and take it over like that and killing all those people and throw them out of their country. Not at all.
Yeah, because people understand that Ukrainians fighting about their land. Not about, we didn't attack nobody. They come on our land. That's it.
I think it's so innately wrong what Putin is doing. There's nothing good about it. It's insane. You see the airstrikes, the missiles, the bombings, but I think that people are coming together, and that's what we need right now.
They're fighting for their country to the core. I'm the son of Albanian immigrants, so this kind of strikes home from the Kosovo War in the late 90s because of power hungriness and the egotistical maniac. You know, it's sad. You know, these are so many people, their whole lives are changing in the blink of an eye.
I have a mother and father there, all my family there, and I'm praying for you, I'm thinking about you, and I'm with you. Remember that. I promise you, I'll do everything possible for my country and for my people to be safe.
I'm actually originally from Ukraine. We actually have a lot of family still over there. At first, my relatives were trying to get to safety, but then they turned back. Even like my aunt and everyone turned back and trying to do what they can by providing food, by building up barricades, whatever they got to do.
Yeah, it's a sense of unity. I think that everyone knows that the power in numbers, and everyone feels so strongly about it. No one wants to sit back and watch what's happening. They want to protect their country, fight for the freedom that they deserve.
This is just can show you how strong our men are and women too, because I know a lot of women, they're taking guns in their hands and they're protecting country. Not every president can stay in their country, take a gun and fight for their own country. I'm very proud of them, and thank you very much, Zelensky.
He's with his people. He's not just a boss telling people what to do. He's a leader. He's leading by example.
And thank you very much, brothers Klitschko.
Klitschko is the mayor of Kiev. Him and his brother are both taking up arms to defend the city.
Seeing that brings even more people together. They recognize that these people love their country and they're going to do whatever it takes to protect it.
We are all united, no matter where we are, either we are in the Bronx or Manhattan or Yonkers or anywhere. We are asking now to help us close the sky because we are receiving numerous amounts of rockets.
This is not just about safety of our country, it is safety of our entire world, because right now, entire world is threatened by Mr. Putin. And I think entire world have to stand up. Every country have to stand up, not just for us, but for themselves too. Because if he can invade Ukraine so recklessly, he can do even more.
The headline was, officials suspect Russia used UN facilities to impact the 2016 election. This was in Newsweek, Chris Riota, September 10th, 2017. I played Little League on this field. So to see this, we're standing between the American game, baseball, right? And then this, and I'm gonna go home and watch Red Dawn and hope for the best. I've lived here for most of my life, and I've never seen anything like this, despite the often tenuous relations, right, between Russia and the United States, Russian Federation, USSR, and so on. I hope they're all concerned with the plight of everyone in the Ukraine, whether they were born there and have been there for centuries, or if they were students from Africa and other places.
To be honest, I feel bad for the Russian people as well, because they've been manipulated and lied to, and some of them don't even know what they're walking into.
Obviously, there's so much hate and evil in the world, but there's so much love also. And I think hearing and seeing the support from everyone all over the world.
Yeah.
So, as we can see from some of that footage, those in Ukraine definitely need that support, and BronxNet stands proudly with the people of the Ukraine. Our production recently covered the televised benefit concert in support of the Ukrainian community, and you can visit our website to view the entire event. That's all for our show today. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Kibin Alleyne, wishing you and yours safety and wellness now and always. See you next time.